Hi, it's Toby from school. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are. In today's session, we're going to look specifically at the way image works in language. So by the end of today's session, you're going to have a better idea as to what image is and how it works. So yesterday, we looked at our code breaking system. We said yesterday that in order to really understand language, we need to know that it works in distinct ways, and we also need a toolkit to be able to read it properly. So I introduced to you the triangle. Okay, so this, although it doesn't look like much at the moment, this is our code breaking system, and that's going to really help us understand language. But before we get really stuck into that, have a look at this. This is an example of image in language. He looked outside and the sky was made of iron. I'd like you please just to take a minute and think about what is implied by that. He looked outside and the sky was made of iron. So I'd like you please to write in the chat what you think is implied, what you think is meant by the sky was made of iron. Okay, so while I wait for some comments there, yesterday, of course, we looked at our code breaking system, and there it is in all its glory. Obviously, you can tell it took me a great deal of time to create in ClipArts. Anyway, this triangle system very much sits at the heart of understanding English, and for the last however many years I've been teaching in school, it really is the best tool that that students can use to really get to grips with language. And last time we looked at the way sound and shape worked in language. Now, if you haven't got a triangle, or you didn't see yesterday's lesson, go to that video after this one and watch that. So this is the tool that you're going to be creating yourselves, and in many of our sessions we're going to be adding to this toolkit, and it's going to be that thing that we take to language. Yesterday we looked at the way in which sound and shape works in language. If you can remember, we looked at the way sibilance works, that amazing S sound that suggests fear or danger, and the way that monosyllabic words, which are words with one syllable, can mean blunt or simple things, and the way that polysyllabic words, that's words with many syllables, can mean complex things. So so far you've probably got this. This is your triangle so far. You can see the sibilants there at the bottom, and the letter sounds with sibilants are S and C and Z and CH and SH, and then you've got the monosyllabic and polysyllabic. But remembering, of course, today's lesson is all about the way in which image works. And when we think about image in language, what we really mean is metaphor, personification, and simile. Or at least these are the main parts of image. So language works in three distinct ways. This is how language works: at the image, at the shape, and at the sound of language. At the sound, we have those letter sounds. At the shape, we have the structure of language, the structure of words. And at the image, we have the images that language creates. And images are created most when metaphors are used. When language is metaphoric. When language is metaphoric, there could be straight metaphors that are being used, there could be similes that are being used, or there could be personification that could be used. So in your triangle, guys, can you please add metaphor, there it is, metaphor, personification, and simile. Metaphor, personification, and simile. So the plan is today then, guys, is that I'm going to show you how not only image works in language, but really how to write about it. So as a teacher in comprehensive schools, often I've noticed there are students that say, "What do you want me to write, sir? What do you want me to say?" And they come to a bit of a blank when they've got questions like, "Have a look at this and tell me what is implied by it." So in the chat then we've got Evie, and she has said, "The sky is very dark and cold." Yeah, that's very good. That's a really good thing to have said. The sky is very dark and very cold. There's a reason why that's on the way to being a very good answer. It's because Evie said two things. The sky is very dark and very cold. If Evie had said the sky is dark, that wouldn't have been so great. It would have been something, but it wouldn't have been so great. In order to get the best marks in English and really to get all the meaning out of it, you really got to extend your responses and say multiple things. So today's lesson, I'm going to show you how to do that, how to say many things about metaphors, personification and simile in a way that will enable you to do it every time you come up against it. So one thing that's worth mentioning is, of course, that this metaphor, the sky was made of iron, is completely impossible. The sky cannot be made of iron. It is entirely impossible. If it was, of course, it wouldn't be up above us. So the weird thing about language is it employs impossible imagery. And it pairs things together that don't belong. Iron does not at all belong with sky, but when you pair those two things, more meaning is created. So today I want to show you how to do that in a step-by-step process. So to sort of recap, because we've covered quite a lot of ground already. Today's session is about the way image works, and we have a toolkit, that triangle, and in that toolkit it's image, shape and sound. And in order to write the very best responses in English and to think about English in the best possible way, we have to get as much out of the language as possible. And here is how. This is what you've got to do. In order to write about language well, you've got to separate the real from the unreal. It's very much worth writing this down. And when this occurred to me about 6 years ago, it really changed the responses of the students that I was teaching, and it really gave them something that was really practical, a really practical approach to language. So you separate the real from the unreal, you explore the unreal in isolation, and you draw your conclusions. So this is a three-step process. Now I'm going to show you how it works. So you can see there we've got the statement above it, those two clauses. He looked outside and the sky was made of iron. And you can identify the real. Him looking outside is real. The sky is also real, but made of iron is not real. So that's the first step. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to separate what's real and what's not. Remember, imagery is about the pairing of impossible things, in this instance, iron and the sky. And you've got to divide those. So we could jump right to the meaning of what is implied by the sky was made of iron. You could say, well, the sky was grey, but that would stop your exploration of it. So in this plan, in this tactical approach, there's a few things to do, and they are the following. Separate the real from the unreal, explore the unreal in isolation, and draw your conclusions. So you separate the real from the unreal, and then you focus only on the unreal now. We've got the unreal in isolation, and this is really crucial that you make sure when you're analysing you're only looking at the unreal. So here we are. Here's my analysis of it. So we're looking at iron. So iron is strong. Iron is powerful. Iron is metallic. Iron is heavy. Iron has a high boiling point, and it's also grey. So there we are. We're exploring the unreal in isolation, and these are the things that we know about iron. Now, the crucial thing to this is at the moment we're not thinking about the sky. It's really central that you don't try and link those two up initially when you're doing your English analysis, when you're writing your responses, but you focus on the unreal bit. So we're focusing specifically on iron, and when we do that, we find out that iron is strong, iron is powerful, metallic, heavy, a high boiling point, and is grey. So those are our readings of iron. I'm sure if you're thinking about this at home, you've got some ideas too. But once we've done that, it's clear that you can start drawing your conclusions so that it's strong. Maybe that tells us, like Evie had said, the sky is made of iron. She's also said here in the chat that sky cannot be made out of iron, and iron is cold, dark, and blank. I wonder what you mean by blank. If you can tell me in the chat, that'd be great, Evie. So perhaps a storm is coming, I've said here. Perhaps as it's metallic, maybe it's conducting electricity. Maybe there's lightning. Perhaps the high boiling point suggests it's impossible to alter. Perhaps it suggests that the course of the storm can't be changed. So this process is separate the real from the unreal, explore the unreal in isolation, and draw your conclusions. And over the course of our lessons, it's very much the cornerstone of our approach to understanding language, and it really gets amazing responses. You know, when I was at school and my teacher would say, what's implied by the sky was made of iron or something like that, I'd often think, well, I just don't know what to write. What do I do? And this is what you do. You separate the real from the unreal, you explore the unreal in isolation, and you draw your conclusions. And like I said, over time, we're going to be developing this. So the iron sky is my metaphor, which I've overused. It's true. Let's have a look at somebody else's. So this that I'm about to show you is the beginning of a story that I love. It's written by Laurie Lee, and the story's title is As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning. And the story is about his adventure, leaving the rural countryside in the 1930s of England and travelling all the way to the Spanish Civil War. And the first chapter is beautifully written, and the imagery that he's used is amazing, and I'd like to show it to you. So here it is. So in this little paragraph, Laurie Lee, the writer, uses amazing imagery, and I'm going to read it, but what I'd really like you to do is I'd like you to take your time and write down the metaphors that you can see. So we've got the stooping figure of my mother, waist deep in the grass and caught there like a piece of sheep's wool, was the last I saw of my country home as I left it to discover the world. She stood old and bent at the top of the bank, silently watching me go, one gnarled red hand raised in farewell and blessing, not questioning why I went. At the bend of the road, I looked back again and saw the gold light die behind her. Then I turned the corner, past the village school, and closed that part of my life forever. There are two examples of imagery there. One at the end is, I think, almost painful really, when he says he saw the gold light die behind her, knowing of course that light doesn't die. But the one that is at the end of the first line and the beginning of the second is the one that I'd really like us to focus on. This is a great example of imagery, and his mum was caught there like a piece of sheep's wool. When reading text, the best thing to do is to look for the impossible. Now we're looking at a simile, which is metaphoric, but similes are pretty easy to spot because they utilise like or as, but rather than hunting for like or as in a page, as many students I've known often do, the best thing to do is to look for the impossible in language. And here's an example. That gold light dying behind his mum is impossible, and so too is the fact that his mum is caught there like a piece of sheep's wool. So we've got this 3-step process. Okay. Separate the real from the unreal, explore the unreal in isolation, and draw your conclusions. So just a quick look again. She was caught there like a piece of sheep's wool. It's towards the end of that first line, at the beginning of the next. So now we've got to separate the real from the unreal. If you can in the chat, it would be great if you could say, thank you Evie, spot on, if you could just write down a piece of sheep's wool, or not so much write that down, but write down what that implies, a piece of sheep's wool, and note that in the chat, and we'll look at that together. So, separate the real from the unreal. His mum is real, like a piece of sheep's wool is unreal. So we're focusing on that, and just specifically thinking about a piece of sheep's wool. What is sheep's wool? What are its purposes and uses? Sheep's wool is insulating. Sheep's wool is useful. What else could sheep's wool be? We think about where it might be. Sheep's wool might be stuck on a piece of barbed wire. It might be left behind. It might be not only left behind, but in a sense discarded, useful no longer serving its purpose. So the best thing then, guys, to do is to write those things down. And if you're in an exam or you're doing your English homework, whatever, you take your notes around the text. So sheep's wool, I'm writing here. I've got my pad here. So sheep's wool is insulating. It keeps us warm. It is useful. And then I'm thinking about that caught there. So caught there suggests that it has been discarded, maybe left behind, and maybe no longer serving a purpose. Also, trapped is good too. So once you get that list, and remember, the really central part of this is to not race ahead and think, right, I'm just going to write about the mum now. I'm just going to write about and link up those two things together. Is you do it in a step-by-step process. So separate the real from the unreal, explore the unreal in isolation, and then draw your conclusions. So what conclusions can we draw about that? But just before that, we've got a comment here. Sheep's wool often gets caught on barbed wire or fencing, like she is stuck standing and watching something. Yeah, that's amazing. Like she is stuck standing. That's a really amazing thing, and I hadn't thought of that in all the years I've been teaching this particular extract. And that's the amazing thing about how we read, is that we often read in different ways. And there's no right answer in English. There's just your own exploration of language. Evie's just said something that I never thought of before, that she's stuck there watching, that she can't do anything about it. That's a really interesting point. So, looking at those explorations in isolation, wool is insulating, it's warm, it's useful, but here it's discarded, left behind, no longer serving a purpose, and as Evie has said, stuck there watching, which is really interesting. So now we make our conclusions. It tells, what do we learn about the mother? Well, that she provided warmth, that she provided insulation, that she had her uses as a mother. I mean, I can't imagine life without my mum, and I know my children couldn't imagine life without theirs, and how useful she is compared to how useless I am. And here she is, she's been discarded, she's been left behind, she's no longer serving a purpose, she's trapped. And she's trapped there watching, almost in a state of paralysis. So from this one metaphor, we've now got about 3 or 4 really rich sentences of analysis of metaphor. And that's what English really is all about. It's about what you can get from the language, how you can wring out every detail, but do so in that step-by-step process. It's no good just being told to explode a quotation or to wring everything out of the quote. That's not useful, but what's useful is a step-by-step process. Separate the real from the unreal, explore the unreal in isolation, and draw your conclusions. So next up, we're going to look at another extract, which is one of my favourites, from, let me have a look. Here we are. So this is from the Snow Goose. The reason I'm laughing is because yesterday I cut my finger opening a tin, and my computer's got a trackpad, and I can't scroll down and use it because I can't use my finger. So I'll try and get there again. So here we've got an extract from the Snow Goose. And the Snow Goose is a really beautiful story written after the Second World War and written by a man called Paul Gallico. And it's about a man, a hunchback, a man who has physical disability. And it's also about a young girl who is abandoned, and about how they rescue a snow goose who has been blown off course, and how this goose has brought these quite isolated people together. And it's a beautiful story, and I love reading it to my students. And this is an extract that tells us about Fritha. So Fritha is the young girl, and when I show you this, what I want you to do is I want you to go to the impossible. Remember, the metaphoric is always the impossible. So here we are. Hunt for the impossible. One November afternoon, 3 years after Ryder had come to the Great Marsh, a child approached the lighthouse studio by means of the sea wall. In her arms, she carried a burden. In this instance, actually, she's carrying the injured snow goose that has been shot, actually. And now the description of her. Remember, we're looking for the impossible stuff. If you can spot it, can you start going through the process? So, if you can spot it, go through the process. Remember, it's the impossible bit. She was no more than 12, slender, dirty, nervous, and timid as a bird. Pure Saxon, large-boned, fair, with a head to which her body was yet to grow, and deep-set, violet-coloured eyes. Now, there are 2 impossible aspects of language. They are nervous and timid as a bird, and they also are as eerily beautiful as a marsh fairy. So we've got 2 examples of simile there, as beautiful as a marsh fairy and as timid as a bird. So remember, you've got this 3-step process. Separate the real from the unreal, explore the unreal in isolation, and draw your conclusions. So those examples are impossible bits of language. You've got, she's compared to a marsh fairy, and she's as timid as a bird. I wonder what that might imply. So I'm going to take my notes, and I'm going to be thinking specifically, I think, about timid as a bird. So this is the unreal, in isolation, timid as a bird. So what does a bird imply? Well, we know that birds fly. We know that birds are small, that they are delicate. We also know that their feathers make them pretty. What else? What else might be implied by a bird? They fly, small, delicate, pretty. They are natural, part of nature. What else could they imply? That they are free. And also, it might be worth making the point that they aren't human, which is probably fairly obvious, but so let's have another look at it. And here we are. So she was as timid as a bird. What does it tell us? So here Evie's written, birds are very scared and often jumpy, and they're also small and frail. Beautiful language. Yeah, frail, fantastic. And they're often scared. Okay, that's great. So at the moment, my analysis on the page, you can see it there, is this is my just exploring the unreal in isolation, this bird in isolation. It's quite thorough. So when I start to draw my conclusions, it's actually going to be, I'm sure, quite rich and quite developed. And Evie's just written something that's really important as well, actually, about birds. They are prey. They are hunted. And that's very interesting because in the snow goose, there are people that live on the marshes that hunt the birds as well. So just to go around the circle then, so we'll start then. So a good question would be, so what do we learn about Fritha? So we learn that she might feel like she is prey, that she is being hunted. We learn that she might feel free. We learn that she might feel free because she's capable of flying. She's capable of doing things that are perhaps beyond human capability. We know that she might be scared. We know that she is small, delicate and frail. Eva's just said that they're hunted by bigger animals, which is a great point. And in this scene, she is bringing to Ryder, who's a much bigger person than she is. So there might even be that tension that she thinks that he is going to hunt her. That they're pretty might imply that Fritha is pretty too. And that birds are not human perhaps suggests that she's not human too, that she's somehow magical. So this process of separating the real from the unreal really works, and it's really practical too. And I suppose that's what I want to give you. I want to give you a strategy to be able to approach English language and actually write about it in a way that will get you the best marks. So a couple of years into my teaching practice in comprehensive schools, the penny really dropped for me, and I thought, well, if I can teach students a process, then they're always going to be able to get really great marks. And when I started doing this, they started getting really great marks. And I'm not boasting, that's not what I'm doing at all, but I'm telling you and showing you that this approach to language, this using the triangle here, is a process that really works. So to run through the process for the first time in these lockdown lessons, I'm going to attempt to do the whole thing. So here I want to link up image, shape and sound, and I want to link them up when I'm analysing text. So we're going to look again at Fritha. And here we are. So we've got, she was no more than 12, slender, dirty, nervous and timid as a bird. We always start at the image. So all that analysis about the bird that we've done, that she might feel hunted, she might feel like a prey animal, she might feel scared, she might feel free and natural. But now let's move on to the way in which the words are structured. This is now the second part of that triangle. This is a bit of an extension, which will include yesterday's session. So these words are not particularly polysyllabic, although here, how about this? But beneath the grime, as eerily beautiful as a marsh fairy. Eerily beautiful, two polysyllabic words next to each other, remembering from yesterday's session that polysyllabic words suggest complexity. Maybe that tells us that actually Fritha is a really complicated character. She's all these things that we've talked about today, that she's prey, that she's scared, all that stuff. And that actually does suggest a complexity. And equally, she's described as eerily beautiful, which is a complex appearance. Those two things I wouldn't necessarily have put together. And let's have a look at the sound, that last part of the triangle in the extract here. So she was no more than 12, slender, dirty, nervous, timid as a bird, but beneath the grime as eerily beautiful as a marsh fairy. She was pure Saxon, large-boned, fair, with a head to which her body was yet to grow, and deep-set violet eyes. Now, we haven't done too much of this, but for me, the vowels in these little sentences are really playing an amazing part. In eerily beautiful, those vowel sounds of E and oo seem to spread out. So too in fairy as well. And equally in the sentence below, we've got large bone, using those elongated vowels, and deep set eyes. So we haven't talked about vowels too much, but perhaps it suggests that these vowels are used to exaggerate how amazing Fritha is to look at, how amazing she is. It's almost like a linguistic wow. And equally, there could be a sense that she is a gentle human being, and those elongated vowels often are soothing when used in language. So if you were to go through the steps using the triangle like that, you would demonstrate to anybody that was reading your work that you were pretty clever. And so what I'd like you to do, though, when you look at language, is try and utilise that. We're going to go over this a few times, and we're going to explore how language works. So I hope today's session has been useful. Please follow us. Please follow our page on Crowdfunder. Please follow our page on Facebook. And please like and subscribe to YouTube. We really want to provide a service and provide really practical tools for students to help them really get on in their studies, for you to get on in your studies. So I'll see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Stay safe and all the very best. Take care. Bye.